Now, they did what they could. The idea was, until 1935, not to emigrate German Jews. The Joint, in fact, encouraged people to stay in Germany, because you have to fight for your rights. An American idea which was okay in the United States, but not okay in Hitler Germany. In 1935, finally, Bernhard Kahn and some German Jews, not Zionists, persuaded the Joint to enter into the emigration work much more radically than they had before. And now they try to rescue German Jews from Germany. But the majority of the funds did not go to Germany. They went to Poland and Romania. Because in Germany, until 1938-39, the Jews, economically speaking, could still exist. In Poland and in Romania, they almost couldn't. And so you have a situation where the Joint is fighting for its life, because Jews in America no longer had the money they thought they had in the 1920s. And in 1938, if you look in your history books, there was another bout of a deep depression in America. And again, 38, 39, you have a decline in income. You have therefore a decline in contributions. The Joint did everything in its power to get more money from American Jews. It did not succeed very well. It wasn't until the outbreak of war, when the economic depression slowly disappeared with the rise of armaments and so on and so forth, that contributions to the Joint again rose. And there you have a kind of a change, because now the Joint accepts in America non-German Jews in much larger number into its own ranks. And one of the most outstanding people there is the man you probably heard about, Dr. Joseph Schwartz, Joe Schwartz. Born in the Ukraine, came to America as a very small child, from a very Orthodox home. He became a rabbi. He abandoned the rabbinate, abandoned organized religion altogether, but remained very, very closely connected to Jewish tradition and to Jewish culture and to the texts. He knew not just the Bible, he knew the Gemara, the Talmud. He became an Orientalist. He spoke Arabic. He did his postdoctoral studies in Cairo. And then he joined first the social welfare organization in New York, and then the Joint itself. And slowly he made his way, a career in the Joint. And when the head of the Joint in Europe, after Bernhard Kahn, it was an American, Morris Stroper, a wonderful man. When he resigned in 1941, Joe Schwartz, who had been his deputy in Europe, became the head of the Joint in Europe. This is 1940. And in 1939-1940, the Joint tried to rescue what it had in Europe. It had representations. The interesting thing, you see, and I don't have really enough time to go into all the details, of course. The interesting thing is that the Joint was very liberal in recruiting European Jews to work for it. These were not people who were in sympathy with the outlook of the leaders of the Joint in New York. Warsaw is a classic example of this. The office in Warsaw was all of them, without any exception, Jewish socialists. Either moderate or radical, either Zionist or Bundist, and they collaborated within the Joint very well, the Bundists and the Zionists. This is very unusual. The head of the Warsaw office was a man by the name of Yitzhak Gitterman, a Russian Jew who had fled into Poland from the Bolshevik Revolution, a Zionist socialist. the money man, the treasurer, was a Bundist, David Guzik. Now Guzik is a Polish word meaning button. So Mr. David Button. This is rather important. Because until 1941, the Joint in America could still send some money to Poland. Very difficult. Not directly, because the Joint had a clear policy not to help the Nazis. So no direct money transfers, which the Germans in one way or another would confiscate. But buying, for instance, flour in Romania, which was until 1941 still neutral, and sending the flour to Poland in trains, selling it there for Polish currency, and then transferring that Polish currency to the Joint in Warsaw. This was the kind of thing they were doing. Similar things they were doing elsewhere too. They had been doing the same kind of thing in the 1930s in Germany. Now they were doing it in Poland. And until 1941 they could do that. But in December 1941, the United States were entered into the war. On their own, the United States would never have entered the war in 1941 or 1942. They were pushed into the war by the Japanese, and then Nazi Germany declared war on America. America, if the Nazis hadn't declared war on America, I doubt very much whether America would have entered the war against Germany in 1942. But luckily for us, for all of humanity, I think, America, as I said, was entered into the war, was pushed into the war. And that meant the cessation of transfer of money, direct or indirect. So what would the Joint do now? What would Polish Jewry do? What would the office in Warsaw do? There was no longer any direct contact with the Warsaw office. There could be no transmission of instructions. There were no instructions. There was no contact. And so what they did, they went to Jews who still had money. They went to smugglers and to very dark characters, and they went to very clean characters who still had money or who conducted some kind of legitimate trade, not legitimate in the eyes of Germans, legitimate in the eyes of Jews, and said to them, look, you won't keep that money because the Germans are going to take it away from you. Give us your Polish zloty, and we will give you receipts stating what the exchange rate on the black market is on that day between the Polish zloty and the American dollar. And after the war, you'll get your money back. Now, if the Joint in America had known this, they would have got heart failure, because this was against American law. And Ernst Beerwald, the head of the Joint, his favorite saying was, if in doubt, ask the State Department. So that would have been no go. But who cared in Warsaw what the people in New York were thinking? You had to get money to help Jews. We were the representatives here, they said, of world Jewry. We have to help. The Joint became, from an American organization, actually a world Jewish organization. The Joint was a bitter enemy of the World Jewish Congress. I mean, the hatred was fantastic. But it wasn't the World Jewish Congress, because simply it couldn't. That worked in Europe during the war, except marginally. What was really important was the work of the Joint. What happened after the war? After the war, the Joint became a huge organization because American Jews now contributed large sums of money. And it was crucial in the establishment of the State of Israel, not directly, but by supporting the displaced persons camps in Europe, in Germany, Austria, and Italy, from where the remnants of European Jewry pressed the Americans and the British, and that pressure was a major factor in the establishment of the State of Israel. and through the Bricha, through the huge rescue organization that was set up by East European Jews, no connection with the Joint, but was then supported by the Joint, again not directly because that was against American law. They supported, the Joint supported the transit, in other words, the railways that transported the Jews, the food that they got, the clothing that they had to replace, and so on. And that, in fact, financed the Bricha. And 250,000 Jews over 5 years were smuggled by the Bricha across the borders into largely the American zones of Germany, Austria, and also into Italy and other places. And again, you have a major effort of the Joint. And the last point that I want to make is that the Joint not only supported Eastern Europe, it re-established through its help French Jewry to a very large extent. It helped the remnants of Italian, Dutch and Belgian Jewry to re-establish itself. It worked in Greece. It worked to an increasing extent in North Africa. The work in North Africa grew after World War II until North African Jews left North Africa in 1948-49, and after that too, the remnants there. And it operated on a huge scale, again indirectly in Shanghai, for the 18,000 Jews from Central Europe who had found refuge in Shanghai in World War II. And then it came here, into Israel. It established, and without the establishment of these various efforts here that the Joint made with sick people, with old people, with new immigrants and so on, Israel would probably have had a terrible, terrible time, because there was no money, there were no resources, and the state was dependent on the one hand on the Joint for internal help, and on the other hand on Germany after the restitution agreements in 1953 for the supply of arms and capital goods. So there was, the Joint is not just an American organization, it is first and foremost an American organization. It is first and foremost dependent on the wealth and the contributions of American Jews. It becomes a world organization, an organization that deals with Jews everywhere in the world. And I think that is what I wanted to say. And now I understand it's your turn.